All right, we're here in Las Vegas with my good friend Richie Arnold. He's with a major SWAT team out here in Las Vegas. He's also a Jiu Jitsu brown belt, and he has his own private tactical training company called Raw Tactics. How you doing, Richie?
I'm good. Hey, thanks you for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. So, how'd you get it? What, how'd you end up getting into the police force and doing what you do?
God, so I've been in the police force for since 2005, and it's kind of funny when I say how I got into the police game was actually the movie Ghostbusters, and I always liked that who you gonna call type mentality, and I was dressed up like a Ghostbuster as a kid and stuff like that, and I was like, oh shit, police is like who you're gonna call. And then when I was pushing a patrol car, I was like, well, who's going to help the police when the police need help? And I was like, oh, the SWAT team. Let me try out for SWAT, and then eventually just made it onto there, and now here I am. So,
Wow. So, what is it that SWAT does that's different or about helping the police?
SWAT, what we're used for is high risk search warrants, high risk activations, anything that is what we would consider above and beyond the capabilities of patrol officers is stuff that we handle. So high risk search warrants, hostage rescues, armed barricade situations, active shooter events, civil disturbances, stuff like that is when we will get activated in order to resolve.
All right, so rather than just your normal service weapon, you have rifles and other things that you have to learn and train with, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So handguns, rifles, less lethal. I can't talk right now. Symptoms, less lethal systems. Um, flashbangs, gas deployment, how to work in gas masks, fast roping from helicopters, rappelling from sides of buildings to mountains, stuff like that. Wherever it is that the job takes us, we have to kind of know what to do.
So it's important to be fit and aware and continue your training, isn't that right?
I would say, yeah, absolutely. Even though it doesn't seem to be the current trend usually in law enforcement, but yeah, in order to do this, if you want to be successful, then yeah, you're gonna have to stay absolutely fit.
Right. So, for example, with the Trump assassination attempt, some of those officers looked like they were maybe out of their element or they didn't train that much. Is that true?
I really don't know what their training level is, but from some of the body camera that has been shown, it does seem like they're a little bit shocked about what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's just not when you're in law enforcement, whether you're a regular patrol cop or you're an investigative unit or on the SWAT team, it's all about just a mindset of just putting yourself there mentally. Yeah, you have to have the physical attributes, but you also have to have the mental attributes to be like, hey, what am I going to do in this situation? What am I going to do in that situation? And constantly run those mental repetitions over and over again. So if something like that does happen, you're just not thinking of it for the first time. You're actually, oh, I actually thought about this. I'm actually running through it in my brain. I've actually ran through it in my brain a few times. And okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And when you're running those mental repetitions, you don't have to have the answer right away, but you may ask your buddy, hey, what would you do in this situation? What would you do in that situation? And they're like, well, I don't know. Maybe we do this, maybe do that. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I would do this. And you kind of come up with a conjoined effort. I remember when I was a field training officer, I'd ask my trainees right when they got to the academy, sitting at a stoplight, like, what do you do if some guy runs into the gas station right there with a mask and a shotgun? What are you going to do? They're like, I don't know. What are you going to do if you see a guy with a mask and a shotgun run out of the 7-Eleven right now? What are you going to do if the guy goes in there and starts shooting? What are you going to do? And just, I mean, they'd be like, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, start thinking about that type of stuff of like, hey, what do you want to do in these major situations? And that's just something that law enforcement needs to do as well, is not only stay physically fit, but mentally fit and start running through these repetitions. And when you start thinking of those mental situations, that'll help guide you for your physical route. Be like, oh, if I need to do this or do that, I may need to work out doing this or may need to work out doing that.
Right. And it seems like, being, so spread out with all the different disciplines and all the different things, you can't be ready for everything. But you constantly need to be practicing and training.
Yeah, so it's just a constant, just repetitions in everything that you do, whether it's firearms, whether it's physical fitness, whether it's, keeping your mental health in check, training with your hands in jiu-jitsu, training how to use your brain and your mouth, because I always tell people all the time, like, hey, if you're going to use your brain, your mouth, and your hands way before you use a firearm, especially when it comes to like the civilian side, even for law enforcement guys, like you can talk your way in or out of a confrontation a lot, to where you're like, if you know how to use your brain, your mouth, you'll probably never usually, unless obviously someone's really devoted to fighting you, you're probably going to be able to talk your way out, and it's actually going to be a better resolution overall for everybody.
That's so interesting because most martial arts, places, they just train once you're in the actual fight. But they don't really train how to avoid the fight or to use your words and all that. And it's so interesting that you say that.
Yeah, that's good. So like the gym that I train at for Grace, it's a Gracie Humaita gym, which is all about self-defense. And our professors do a really, really good job of trying to, hey, they really emphasize, hey, make sure you use your words. Tell them, hey, it's okay. You don't want to do this, And sometimes they'll throw into you don't want to do this because if you do, you're going to get hurt. They give them almost that warning, like you're going to get hurt if you keep messing around. And, so it's extremely important. And even in stuff that I'll teach civilians as well is like, hey, these are ways to help avoid being in that situation. And then if you get caught in that situation, these are the best ways to defend yourself. And then once you survive, this is what happens afterwards. How do you call the police? What do you say? What do you do? What are the programs out there to help you with post-victimization and stuff like that? So there's actually a long gamut of things that happen in the fight. It's just not a fight. How could you avoided it? What happened during it? And what's going to happen after? So there's a huge plethora of stuff that goes on.
Lots of stages besides just in the fight.
Yeah, if it's just the fight, then that's great. But people think that because they see it on the movies, they see it on TV, they see it in sports competitions where it's just the fight. They fight their rounds, they do whatever they need to do, and then it's over. And they go to bed, they go eat dinner and do whatever. They don't, But in real life, okay, well, what happened before? What happened during? And what's going to happen after?
Right, maybe you go to jail.
Maybe you go to jail. If you don't go to jail, you're at least getting sued. We say that you can defend yourself inside your house legally, defend your life, and you'll be cleared criminally. But you better be prepared for that guy or girl's family who broke into your house to sue you for shooting their loved one. They're going to sue you. It's going to happen. It's ridiculous how this goes. But so you got to think of the big picture. A lot of times when you're just walking on the street, like I'm gonna, this guy has a problem with me, so we're just gonna exchange words or whatnot. They go, screw this. I'm gonna fuck this guy up. And you're like, oh, no. Think like, okay, yeah, you may. What's going to happen afterwards? Right. Are you going to be hurt? Is he going to be hurt? Is the cops going to be involved? Is there going to be a report that's filed? Is he going to get an attorney and now sue you for hitting him and everything else and all this other crap that it's just not worth it? Sometimes being the bigger man is just whatever, just walking away type thing.
Right. You'll definitely get sued.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
So, with all your training and everything, why did you go into jiu-jitsu?
Jiu-jitsu has been such a love-hate relationship for me for so long. I grew up in a big boxing background, coming from the Pittsburgh area, and I was very confident in my boxing skills from like Junior Olympics to Police Olympics and everything else. Had phenomenal records, and I felt like I was sounding like Trump there. The phenomenal records, best records. I did them. They're the greatest records, but really, really good type records. But and then I was training at a gym where I was boxing at, and it was a mixed boxing, striking, and jiu-jitsu gym. And a good friend of mine, he's like, hey, Richie, how come you don't do jiu-jitsu? And I was like, no one's going to take me down to the ground. No one's going to do this. No one's going to do that. And he's like, well, let's spar. And I was like, you're insane. No way. He's like, no, really. It's mouthpiece, put on some MMA gloves, and let's go like 50, 75%. I was like, all right, I'm going to shut this guy up. And I was tagging him hard, hitting him. He just kept coming. Eventually, he gets close enough to where I'm like, oh, he's close enough. I'm just going to rest for a minute. I'm going to grab onto him. I'm used to being broken up in a sport of boxing. And now all of a sudden he's like, great. It's like foot sweep, takedown. He's on top of me, breaking my arm, choking me out. In a 6-minute round, I probably tapped out at least 6 or 7 times. So I was like, I need to round out my game. This was a big eye opener for me to be like, I got to learn how to fight on the ground now.
Wow. So they don't teach that in the police academy?
So they do. But just like with everything, it all depends on what department you're with and everything else. Your defensive tactics may only be a week long, but they're covering strikes one day. They're covering ground defense another day. They're covering handcuffing another day. They're covering weapon retention another day. So it's just not all ground fighting. It's just kind of giving you an introduction to everything that's going on, enough to where you're confident enough to be like, okay, I can possibly handle myself, because they'll put you in some tight situations where you're fighting people. But it's going to be up to you to progress that training more and more, because it's like, if I told you like, hey, I'm going to give you, a week of training, and then I'm going to give you a week of training on ground defense and striking starting today for a week. And then next year at this time, we're going to come back and show me what you know. You're going to forget everything that you learned this week. It has to be a constant repetition and going over and over with it.
Do they allow the carotid restraint or the rear naked choke here in Nevada?
So in deadly force situations, yes. But at least with certain departments around here, it's not a restraint technique. It'd be more for like a deadly force type situation.
Gotcha. What would you say? What rank would you say the average police officer is in jiu-jitsu?
White to blue. So white to blue.
Yeah.
It should be that. I know there are some programs throughout the nation to where in their academy they do so much ground fighting that they graduate the academy not only as a police officer, but they graduate as a blue belt as well.
That's awesome.
Like once you get that like taste for it and you're at blue belt, you're starting to actually like understand it now. You're like, okay, I get it. I don't have to freak out when someone's on top of me. I don't have to freak out when this is happening versus when you don't know and someone you start freaking out, you start hyperventilating, you start breathing really, really quick, you start trying to use all your strength, and if you can't move them, then all of a sudden you're getting gassed out and you start to freak out and you're like, well, that didn't work. Right. And then it just turns into panic mode. It feels like you're drowning almost.
So yeah, you got to keep up with the training and stuff. Speaking of which, we also have taken one of your courses at Raw Tactics, and it was close quarter combat and shooting, and it was awesome. And I feel like I know nothing, and you're so good and fast. And how did you start that business?
So I've always loved training. I started training in 2008 with my department in defensive tactics and less lethal stuff and firearms. And throughout the years, as I started improving my training skills to where I'm like thinking, wow, I'm getting a lot of good compliments, getting a lot of feedback. Maybe I can roll this into something to where I could take what I'm learning now and I can start giving it back as well to the community. Be like, hey, I can be someone who you can reach out to get that extracurricular training that, everyone says, go out, reach out and get training. Well, with who? Well, there's lots of people out there, and I chose to be one of those people. And I really do enjoy training. I love training people and sharing that knowledge, whether it's something that they're going to use or something they're not going to use. If they want to have that knowledge, then absolutely, hey, you can come and get it.
Yeah, and you actually have a lot of resources. You can actually find I saw a new target of yours on Instagram. You have actual lessons and things and tips on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a YouTube channel. We haven't been too active on it. We're about to start back up, but lots of firearms instruction, lots of firearm drills, lots of stuff that works for us that can work for you as well. And obviously, watching it on YouTube is one thing. You actually have to come take a class, either whether it's with us or with somebody else. Trying just to watch it on and then duplicate it's not the same as actually being there and getting the hands on, like, hey, you're actually doing this wrong, you're actually doing that wrong. It's like trying to become a black belt of jiu-jitsu through online training. Like, okay, maybe you'll reach that rank, but until you actually get the actual instruction to where the professor's like, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, you're doing that wrong. Yeah, you're doing it, but it's not the way you should be doing it. There's actually a shorter path, a more efficient path for you to get to your end game, and these are the little details that are going to help you get that much better. Then once you realize those little details, everything just starts opening up to like, oh, I understand that now. And once you understand the why and you understand the why you're doing something, then it helps you actually learn. I should say it actually helps you like retain it better because you understand why you're doing it.
Right. I was just at a class last week in San Diego, and a lot of the guys were saying that they were intermediate or advanced. And then we went to the range, they were like flagging people. They were all over the place. I feel like a lot of people are, maybe once they get their CCW or something, they think they're like John Wick, and they're horrible.
Yeah, the CCWs are a tough pill to swallow because the classes that people are required to take to get a CCW, at least out here in Nevada, I mean, it's a joke. I mean, they learn some laws, they learn some things here and there. They do a very, very basic, easy qualification that my 12-year-old can pass. And they're like, okay, go carry a gun, which there's a lot of states actually that are switching to they're called constitutional states. So we're like, hey, Second Amendment says that you're allowed to have a gun. You don't need a permit to carry concealed, carry open carry, or anything. Just you can carry a gun. If you can legally buy one, then buy one and you can carry it however you want. And Nevada, I've heard, is possibly switching to like a constitutional type carry state. Hasn't happened yet. But right now you have to have an actual permit to legally carry concealed. And so you go through the classes and all the processes in order to do that, legally here. But yeah, they do that and they think they're good to go. But half these people who do CCW classes, have never even touched a gun before either. So you're like, all right, this is, I would tell them, like, when I used to do CWs, I don't do them anymore, but it's like, I'm not here to teach you how to shoot a gun. I'm here to check the boxes that are required by the state, to explain the laws to you, make sure you can shoot, and then leave. And then that's it. Like, I'm not here to actually teach you the fundamentals and everything. Like, I'll explain it, but I'm not going to devote all this time to it, because this is not that class. It's a certification class to check the box and sign the name and get out of here. So it is scary on some of the people out there who just think that have a gun just to have a gun. But, well, if you're under that mentality, are you more of an asset in a situation if you choose to use a gun, or are you more of a liability? And I would venture to say you're probably more on the liability side of things.
Right.
So,
Well, your classes are obviously much more in-depth and advanced. What kind of classes do you teach, or do you recommend people to take that have guns?
So I noticed that you said that you went to, like, some people consider themselves intermediate or advanced type thing. I try not to label our classes like beginner, intermediate, advanced. Everything's just gonna be like, hey, this is a pistol class, this is a rifle class, and then as the classes go, there'll be lots of the same stuff, but each class that progresses throughout the year, maybe we'll add something a little bit different, or we'll add something a little bit more. Because the only difference between like a beginner class and an advanced class, if you're labeling it, is basically just how quickly you're shooting and how accurately you're shooting. So if it was a beginner's class, I'd say, okay, at 5 yards, I want you to shoot the A zone of the target from the holster, draw and fire 6 rounds into the A zone in 7 seconds. Beginner class. Advanced class, like, okay, from the 7-yard line, I want you to draw from the holster and deliver 6 rounds into the A zone only in 2 seconds. So it's just speeding up the fundamentals. You know, I say that in fighting a lot, whether it's jiu-jitsu, boxing, or gunfighting, is how do you beat your opponent? And it's just you execute the fundamentals quicker than them. And so that's why at the very beginning of like a jiu-jitsu, like as a white belt, you're still doing the same stuff as you are as a black belt, but the black belt is more proficient at it and does it better. They're not doing anything necessarily any different. They're still doing arm bars, mounts, guard sweeps, takedowns, anything like that. But, and same thing in firearms. Like from a beginner class, I'm going to show you how to grip a gun. I'm going to show you to manipulate the trigger, line up your sights, stand in order to have recoil control and shoot as fast as you can at that level. And then at a advanced level, I'm still going to show you how to hold the gun. I'm just going to tell you to move this quicker and control the recoil, so the rounds aren't splattering all over the place. You're actually hitting in your desired target within a time frame. And then maybe add in like a little bit of more stress to it, like maybe a little bit of movement, a little bit of time constraints, a little bit of smaller hit zones. And then that's when you start expanding more and more in your skills, is when you start taking that type of training.
Awesome. Where can we find you?
Rawtactics.com. That's RAtactics.com, not RAW. Ra is like the Egyptian sun god Ra. Rawtactics.com, on Instagram, Raw Tactics, on YouTube /Raw Tactics. And, soon we'll be on Greyhive. And Greyhive is a new up-and-coming platform for gun users to show their skills, because YouTube's getting a little bit restrictive right now. But Greyhive, we have a platform on there that we're slowly adding stuff to, and you can check us out on Greyhive as well.
My man, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate you.